Hello and welcome to our monthly Edge user group. We're glad you're able to join us today. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and our recording will be on our Acro archives page, our Acro webinar archives page within the next 24 hours. If you haven't done already, please go ahead and turn on closed captions. And we also enjoy answering your questions. For all questions for our panelists today, please go ahead and submit those to the Q&A feature. You can ask your questions at any time and you can ask them anonymously. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Dave. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Belma. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Edge user group of 2025. I know I say it whenever I'm the person introducing it, but this is really a high point of my my month. Every time we have a third Thursday. Um, so historically, the ISC, International Educational Standards Council that you see before you here dates back to 2001. Without them, we wouldn't have any of the conclusions that we reach in EDGE. And, this basically would affect mobility and missions for a lot of us if we didn't have EDGE. But anyway, the IESC is chaired by Jasmine Saidi Kunert. And you can see the committee members here. We have today with us Nancy Katz, and we have Robert Watkins, and we have Shelby Kearley. And let's see, who else do we have? Of the voting members, that's it, I think. And then I am here, and I think my colleague Julie Funaki is in the wings. And I would like to pass things off to Nancy Katz, who has a little bit to tell you about some of the inner workings of the IESC recently. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you. If you can go back to the previous slide of the pictures of this illustrious group, there are fellows listed there. And Deborah and Colleen are our previous fellows, and the current one are Sarah and Jacqueline. The fellows do research under the guidance of members of the committee, of the council, and on various topics that the council decides in advance. This past, the former fellows, Deborah and Colleen, just finished a white paper on Indian grading scales about the 10-point scale that is relatively new, relatively in quotes, and the paper is being reviewed and edited at the Acro National Office, and you'll hear more about that at the next meeting in December. So keep your ears and eyes posted for this upcoming paper with some sample credentials about the 10-point scale. The fellows were working with myself, with Leslie, and with Shelby. The new group of fellow cohorts are Sarah and Jacqueline, and they are working with Robert and Shelby again. And they will be doing research on joint and dual degrees. So we look forward to their presentation at the National Acro Conference in the spring, and then it will be followed by either a much larger presentation for Acro members or a white paper to be determined. So, if in the future, in the late summer, early fall, we'll be putting out a call for new fellows for the next year, 2026. I hate to say that. we're really advancing ourselves, aren't we? And that you might be interested in doing some research as well with the IESC. Dave, I'm going to flip this back to you so you can talk a little bit more about the next slide and the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I really almost let everyone down. I know most people who have been to these before come so that my colleague Julia Funaki can do a little bit of usually weather-related trivia related to what's going on, maybe from the Farmers Almanac, maybe not. I don't have access to that vaunted tome so for this year, but I can say that we here down here in the lower 48, let's call it, and Canadian friends don't scoff, but we are getting an Arctic blast next week. Is really when it's supposed to hit most of us, I think. And when I was a kid, an Arctic blast was anything under 20 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Now that I'm older, it's anything below 0, and we're going to get a little bit below 0 in Wisconsin, where I'm talking to you from. But everybody stay warm and don't lick metal pipes, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, yeah, as you can see here, this slide is self-explanatory. All of the credential advice has to be vetted and voted on through the IASC that makes its way into EDGE. And that's why IASC is really the kind of the bedrock on which all the content rests. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Drew Carla.
Dave, thank you so much for throwing that this way. I double dog dare you to stick your tongue on a metal pole. I know it's a slight breach of etiquette, but so today what we're going to talk about, we've got a couple of updates for you. Within India, there is a specific Master of Business Administration that we want to call to your attention. It's an integrated program that you may not have encountered too frequently before. We also want to, if you were present with us for the last EDGE user group, we talked about, in Italy, we talked about a doctoral level degree. And we also mentioned some Corsi that had a very similar name. Oh, hey, speaking of attending last time, can we run that poll to see who's here today, who's been with us before, and who they're representing? While you're filling that one out, we also, one thing that we're going to be talking about is some of the ongoing research and updates that are happening within some grading scales, both at the secondary as well as the post-secondary level within the province of Alberta. And so we've got a couple little updates there. As mentioned before, please, if you have questions, we encourage those. Get those into the Q&A. We'll have a Q&A time reserved for you there at the end after we go through just some of these updates. But I think that we are getting relatively close here. Let's go ahead and just call it 5, 4, 3, 2, and here we are. We've got how many people locked in here, Belma? We've got about 90% of folks are already EDGE subscribers. If you need to check out EDGE, sign up for a free trial. You'll get to access EDGE for a week, see if it's worth using in your own offices for your own purposes. Some people use EDGE just for specific education systems. Some people use it to evaluate credentials from all around the world. For many of you, you've been here with us before. For about 1 in 5, it's your first user group. Welcome, guys. This is a very easily accessible webinar where you're going to be able to directly connect with the folks that are doing this research, helping to share this information with all of you. And it's just a great way to connect with other colleagues. Welcome. Come back again. And we got about 3 out of 4 of you are here with an institution. 1 in 5 are here with an evaluation agency, and we've got some other representation. One of the things that we heard in past EDGE user groups was that not all of the different groups, the segments are represented. So we went ahead and did include that other here. We have been trying to listen to all of your feedback, and we actually just participated with a whole bunch of folks with gaining a bunch of information. I don't have anything to share on that this time. You'll have to come back where for the next EDGE user group, where if this was your first time, you'll get to click the yes, I've been here before. Anywho, moving on, I'm gonna pass this over to the International Education Standards Council members that you all really are interested to hear from. Jasmine, what's up with this integrated MBA?
Well, thank you, Drew, and hello, everybody. So the Integrated Master of Business Administration was a credential that ran across my desk here at ACEI, Academic Credentials Evaluation Institute. And what we did was my evaluators typically always kind of reference EDGE, and they brought it to my attention that this particular credential under this title was not noted in EDGE. So we presented our findings to the IESC, and we voted on the credential advice, which I will share with you in a second. So the Integrated Master of Business Administration, and that's exactly how the degree title appears on the final diploma, requires for admission completion of Standard 12, upper secondary, grade 12, and it is a 4-year program. The candidate that we were evaluating completed this as a 5-year part-time study because they were doing it through distance learning, but it is 4 years full-time. And what they receive is the degree title of Integrated Master of Business Administration. There is no interim degree such as a bachelor. So it's 4 years after Standard 12, and this credential provides access to graduate education at the universities in India. The IESC approved the placement recommendation. The credential advice has been that it is comparable to a US bachelor's degree because it represents the 4-year program with entry after senior high school, providing access to graduate education in India. As you know, there are other such integrated degrees. They're already listed on EDGE. If my colleague Nancy, if you wish to add something to these other, like the BEng, the BTech, and these other programs, I'd like to pass the mic to Nancy. Otherwise, the Integrated Master of Business, very solid program. We looked at the courses, and the first 2 years or the first 4 semesters are the foundation level subjects, and then they continue on to the last 2 years in more, what we consider upper division level courses in business.
Yeah, Jasmine, I'll just make a comment. As throughout the years, I've been doing Indian credential evaluation for a long time, that for any MBA from India, you really need to check what the admission requirement is to the program, because there are so many different patterns, let's say, and that's why in Acro EDGE you will see 3 different Master of Business Administrations listed there, because each one has a different entry requirement, and therefore they have a different equivalency. Not all MBAs are alike in India, so be very cautious and just check what the admission requirement is to the program, and make sure your individual has that particular degree. So that's my only caution on this. Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you. All right, we can pass this on to our next presenter. And yes, and this is a good sample of the diploma that we had received. And as you can see, it literally has the title of Integrated Master of Business Administration. Thank you, Drew.
All right. Thank you, Jasmine and Nancy, for that. You might remember, if you were here at the December EDGE user group, that we talked about the Diploma di Perfezionamento in Italy. And that was the first research doctorate, that Italy came out with. Goes back to 1927. And some institutions maintain calling their research doctorate by that name. And we had previously not had the distinction between the diploma and the course, the corsi or corso di perfezionamento, which is a separate thing from the diploma. In any case, we discussed that last time. So just following up, we now have separate credential advice for the diploma and for the corsi, and so the corsi as they exist can be anywhere from 3 to 1+ years, and they're they're called, I think, something like formazione permanente, or continuing education, basically. And they're a little bit different from how we view continuing education, like CEU units that you would take if you're going to Orlando for a dentist conference to learn to do something and getting your CEU credits. It's a special branch of university study within Italy, and does not lead to a formal degree. And by that, I mean it doesn't lead to a national degree within the national degree structure. And so it's almost related to some of the university specific master's titles, but it's not a master even in nominally. So it's just these are courses. A lot of times you get the same terminology used in medicine. So they'll have a corsi di perfezionamento or corso for one specific course. This happens to just refer to plural courses, but courses in the sense of a program. So the main takeaway here is not to downgrade the diploma if you're faced with that and using the corsi credential advice. So for the corsi, we have basically graduate level study. Some of the short ones, the credit value is quite low. You'd be looking at something like 15 ECTS for a 3-month course or something. But the longer ones can be measured in ECTS and go all the way up to 60 for a year-long course. So that's the second part of our discussion of these continuing education as they're termed in Italy. Courses. So these are just the ones that we originally had up. We did not have the diploma equivalency before, which is actually in it's a set number of institutions that award the diploma as a PhD degree. And so that's the thing to remember there. And let's see. The next here we go. So we have the research doctorate was the next one to come up and have new credential advice. Now, you will probably, if you've done a lot of evaluating on Italian credentials, especially if you're doing something at your university and bringing a professor in, or for example, you'll see this research doctorate, dottorato di ricerca, and this was the PhD degree that was, or the research doctorate, let's say, that was developed in 1980 by the Ministry of Education in Italy. The name has not changed, but the structure of it has changed somewhat because now Italy is following the Bologna conventions of having a first, second, and third cycle degree. And it used to be that you would get your laurea di dottore, which was not a doctorate, but it had doctor in the title, and then that would get you into the research doctorate program, which was called dottorato di ricerca. It's the same name now, but it's a third cycle Bologna compliant degree. So even though they're named the same and basically have the same function, it's a different pathway now that leads to it. So we changed the credential advice to make that clear that now you need a 5-year, basically either an integrated or a 3+2 Italian degree sequence leading to the master's or the laurea specialistica, and that gets you into the research doctorate. So the path has changed. The credential remains kind of in terms of overall comparable level the same. And I think that does it for the research doctorate in Italy.
All right. We're now moving up north to where the snow squall is, up to Canada into the province of Alberta. One of our users, Ina Shaisan, let the IESC know that we may need to take a look at the secondary grading scale that is currently listed in the AcroEdge profile for Alberta. We're voting on that tomorrow, so there's not an update yet, but I did want to let you know that there's probably going to be an update approved tomorrow. And so we'll bring you that in more detail at next month's meeting. But the other thing that we have gone ahead and done is in keeping with the policy that the IESC has for grading scale entries for post-secondary education in the EDGE profiles, we have updated the post-secondary grading to make it reflective of the provincial grading scale in place since I believe it's 2003, might have been 2006, so that it doesn't I don't want to say clutter, but so that it doesn't cause any confusion on the profile. So we do want to caution you that whenever it's available, please refer to the grading scale that's on the post-secondary credential that you receive. It should be on a 4.0 scale if it's been since 2003-ish, but prior to that, it was a 9-point grading scale. So you'll see some the 9-point grading scale and the 4.0 grading scale on there now. But just be aware that sometimes the grading scales could be different. So please refer to the grading scale information that's on the document just in case. And like I said, next month we should have an update for you on the secondary scale.
Thanks, Joel. So one of the things that we do have coming up, as you know, since you're here present with us today, we do a bunch of different webinars that are available to you here at ACRO. As Thelma mentioned, this one's going to be put up onto the site and you can reference it. There's a webinar archive. You can go back and you can look at past EDGE user groups. You can go through and you can review some other things that might be of interest for you. I highly encourage all of you to go and review what you can learn there from the different webinars. But if you're more interested in something in person, and I don't know, interested in traveling to Washington, D.C., you could come and stay at Yours Truly Hotel in D.C., and you might even see Robert there.
Thanks, Drew. Yes, indeed. Have the ticket over here behind me, ready to go. February the 16th is going to be here before we know it. But basically, the ACRO Institutes, International Institutes, are 4-day long, sort of intensive delving into how to evaluate international credentials. You know, one of the while EDGE is a beautiful tool and is dynamic because it can be updated quickly once we learn of any errors or omissions or just changes in educational systems. It's not meant to teach you how to evaluate international credentials. We leave that to other venues, other events that do just that. Of course, the annual meeting has a number of sessions where you learn about educational systems. I'll, for example, be doing one along with Emily Say and Leslie Clausen that I'm looking forward to, called What Do We Do Now? U.S. 3-year degrees and its effect on international admissions policy. That should be a lot of fun. I hope you're able to come to that. But one of the other things that we do standalone from the annual meeting is the International Institute. And again, 4 intensive days of how to evaluate, starting with, as you can see there on Monday, starting with essentially a broad view of the basics and the various methodologies and so on. And then we move, as the week progresses, we move into more specific countries. The 4, I guess, that would, and there are more than that, that are ultimately presented, but the 4 that are most important would probably be the UK and France, simply because those 2 countries, through history, colonial history that is, left their mark on those countries in so many ways, but one of the ways they left a mark was with the educational system, so that you will see the British system, you'll see the French system played out in a number of other countries in Africa and Asia. The other 2 countries that are important are obviously China and India, the ones that you see coming across your desk, credentials most of all. So we'll certainly spend a lot of time on those, but there'll be others as well. And like Drew said, it's all in DC, which is a great place to visit, and for any reason. I was just there on a brief trip up for to the National Gallery and the Impressionist exhibit. So there's so many things you can do in DC, as well as learn a lot you can tell your bosses. So back to you, Drew.
And if DC is not the Washington that you would like to visit, might I interest you in a West Coast option? The 110th annual meeting for ACRO is going to be in Seattle this year. And you do have until the end of this month for anyone that likes a deadline and really helps cement it in. You have until the end of this month to get your early bird rates locked in. If you're going to be attending, I highly encourage you to save some money. Everyone loves to save a little bit of money. They've put together a bunch of great information so you can make the most of your trip out to Seattle. When you're not getting all of that information that Robert was telling you that you can take back and share with all your colleagues, one of the things that we really do like to remind all of you is that you've been put into these roles because you are experts, because you are the people that do the research, that are qualified to offer the advice. So come reinforce all of that. We really are excited to have you. And I think the only other thing that we want to highlight before getting to your questions, Dave, would you like to come on and read off any questions that we have? I know that we're working on Lebanon, Costa Rica, and Peru. I don't think those are up yet, but that's just an example of some of the ongoing ladder work where we are standardizing across the board.
Yeah, nice transition of vis-a-vis Washington's, by the way, Drew. I think I'll take the second question that was posted first in order, just because Robert was just talking about the Institute. The question is, will the ACRO Institute focus on transfer be back? I am not on ACRO Institute faculty, so I wonder if Robert or might like to come back on just for a second and answer that one.
Sure, Dave. Once upon a time, the institutes have been going on for quite some time, at least 20 years or more, and I've been involved in most of that time. And initially, what we had was the summer was always sort of the beginnings, how to do it, how to evaluate credentials. And then the winter one, usually around January or February, was focusing on transfer credit specifically. Now what we've done is to move away from that kind of dichotomy, and we've sort of put a little of everything in there. So what you'll get at the Institute now is undergraduate admission, freshman admission, transfer credits. Particularly, we enjoy seeing folks that are involved in education abroad because sometimes their needs are missed, but they need to know the same skills on how to take overseas documentation and add it to the U.S. students' transfer credit balance and so forth. So we do touch on that as well, of course, as graduate admission, what is or is not comparable to U.S. bachelor's degree, that kind of thing. So to answer that question, yes, we'll get into some transfer credit, such as anything from, credit from high school study, quote unquote high school study, such as GCEA levels or Quebec CEGEP, things like that, in addition to actually looking at university transcripts from abroad and how to convert those into credits where credits already exist or a system is used, like ECTS, or where largely no credit system is involved, such as India. So yes, we'll touch on transfer credit, no question about it.
Thanks, Robert. I'll just piggyback on there with a semi-tangential observation. Whether it's attending the institutes or attending, the pre-conference workshops at the annual meeting, or even going to sessions, or just attending annual meeting in general, there's a lot of learning that takes place between the participants that really has nothing to do with the instructors. I see people getting together all the time when I do workshops, for example, and forming kind of these clans or cliques, and doing all sorts of, cross-pollination in terms of what procedures happen at one school versus another and how they would handle specific instances that might have come up during the sessions, but nobody really had time to discuss in detail. So I realize there are budgetary restrictions and all sorts of things apply to whether or not somebody can go to an annual meeting, but if you can go, I think the parts that occur outside of the sessions or after the sessions or even within this, especially in a workshop situation where it's just at lunch or wherever, very valuable stuff. I always learn a ton of things. And I've been doing this, for fairly long time, but there are just so many things you can't really keep under your control anymore. And I love to hear, what's going on from other people. So that's just another shameless or not plug for doing either the Institute or the annual meeting or both.
Dave, can I jump in here on that
Yeah.
as well? I want to really emphasize and echo what Dave just said, because certainly there's the information that's coming from the presenters. There's no question about that. They're bringing the information, but then the other piece of it that is so makes these gatherings so worthwhile is that you soon learn from your peers around the table at an institute or in the audience of a session presentation annual meeting. What do they do? I mean, it's one thing for Dave to tell you how you might approach Indian degrees, but it's also instructive if the person next to you who happens to be the institution down the street or in the next state over, which was either a peer institution or even a competing institution, how they do it. I'll never forget one of the things that our former bosses, went to I think it was, I don't remember, CGS, Council of Graduate Schools, or if it was NAGAP, but she learned what Ohio State was doing in terms of documentation for international students. And what they were doing was not requiring official sealed envelope kind of mail-in information in order to complete a file before making an admission decision. They were accepting uploads of documentation, which of course is unofficial, but once admitted, that individual then had to bring in the real document. That way you cut down on the amount of time spent in the mailroom opening stuff. Your evaluators can spend other time. But anyway, learning tricks and what others are doing is really, really helpful and really is an added plus to whatever you learn in terms of session content itself. And remember, these can be a one-time off thing. And I don't know about you all, but I've found here at UT Austin that institutions have a tendency to be able to spend money on stuff, maybe not on people like they should, but they can certainly spend it on stuff, especially if it's a one-off. Going to the institute, and then you bring back what you learn and spread it to your cohorts in your office. So think about that, how cost effective it is in that sense. Okay, Dave, sorry for that segue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Bottom line, go if you can. No one knows everything, which is a comforting thought sometimes. Anyway, the second question, which is first in order that we received, is about the school leaving certificate exams in Nepal. From 2016 onward. The question is, do any of you require the provisional certificate as part of admission/high school equivalency? The question discussed also that that person also receives a provisional certificate from the NEB a lot of times, and it seems like it's a provisional version of the school leaving certificate. I don't know, I want to put anybody on the spot, but I imagine Shelby or somebody else might have something to say, or Robert again, go ahead.
Well, we certainly know that in 2013, it changed from the Higher Secondary Education Board to the National Examinations Board. I'm not as familiar with, I mean, I've generally gotten the exam itself from the board and not
Same,
not a provisional certificate. So
same.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say same thing.
Oh.
We don't get the provisional certificate either, so.
So I'm totally happy with the, with the real thing.
Right.
To me, it's not like China where you have a graduation certificate but need a degree certificate, because the graduation certificate doesn't mean the degree was actually awarded. The provisional, I should think, is simply hey, guess what? Here's the immediate results and official to follow, kind of thing.
Yeah, what we would look for on that document is if it says anything about these are provisional in nature and subject to change.
Ooh, yeah.
If it says that on there, then we would not accept it. We require the final certificate. So we do get a lot of these provisional results slips from like the Caribbean Examinations Council examinations, from the WIAC examinations, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Ed certificates as well. So we do not accept provisional results since they are subject to change. Now, normally what we tend to see is what changes is they misspelled their name or the birth date is wrong or something like that. But it's not generally the grades, but it could be the grades on the subject because there's a window of time between when the preliminary results are issued to when the final results are issued, and they have the ability to request a change or request a regrading during that time period. So we do not accept provisional results if that's the provisional results you're talking about. If it just happens to be like kind of like an Indian degree provisional certificate kind of a thing, then we would probably go ahead and accept it. But I haven't actually seen what you're talking about, so I can't say for sure. I'm sorry.
Right, that is the last of the official questions that we were asked. And I'll allow this to flow on. I think let's see. Who am I handing off to? Drew?
Sure, I'll catch. You know I'll always talk about other opportunities that you have to connect. We discussed how you could go and you could have the face-to-face interaction at maybe the Institute, at the annual meeting. Not everyone can do that. We understand. If you are at an institution or an organization, if you are somewhere that has an ACRO membership, which is separate from an EDGE subscription. An EDGE subscription is access to information. ACRO membership gets you access to a whole bunch of things, including scholarly journals. We've got newsletters that are going to come out that are updating you on relevant laws that are changing that you need to be aware of. But if you're at an ACRO institution, a member institution there, you have access to the exchange, and you can go in and you can pose your questions and you can share your expertise. I always recommend the international activities is a great place to go and ask your questions. The international institutions community is a different one that has been set up for institutions that are based outside of the United States. And it's just a great place to kind of connect with some of those questions. There's a bunch of opportunities to go in there to explore and again, ask your questions and share your expertise, because this is a place where when we learn about something, we're going to go in, we're going to make those updates, but you might have faster access if you've received it there in your office. Within every page of ACRO EDGE, there's actually a link where you can submit an update. So if you get if you come across a document that we don't reflect within EDGE, we'll review it as long as it comes into us with all that students' information protected. So it's got to be redacted, not just covered up, because if you just cover it up, the computer, the metadata is still underlying there. So it's actually a function of redacting that, sending it in, and we're going to be able to review that and make good determinations using those best practices that we're teaching those fellows about. Robert, I see that you have come on. What do you got? You're open.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time left, and I wanted to play off a little bit the integrated MBA, not so much that credential, but a broader concept. And of course, I don't suppose I'm sure that everyone in the audience is probably familiar with the fact that in the last few years, the two giant sending countries to our institutions, China and India, have been, while they've been more or less even, now due to the, I guess, political situation between the United States and China, the China numbers have started to fall a bit, and the Indian ones are rising. Certainly that's what we're seeing at UT Austin. And when I work with and help people around the country, I'm getting the same impression. But what I wanted to talk about was the concept of integrated degrees. It seems that Indian universities are really getting into this practice. The other ones that we see, and I'm going to have to figure out and talk with the other IESC members to see how we might work this into EDGE. But another thing that I've seen a lot in the last couple of years can be somewhat insidious, and that is an integrated Bachelor of Engineering or Bachelor of Technology, which of course is a 4-year degree. And then at the end of it, after another year or so, they will get a Master of Science in biology or chemistry or physics or something along those lines. So they get 2 degrees. And of course, one, those of us that adhere to what we find in EDGE, and that happens to be the policy here at UT Austin, we of course are quite happy with the Bachelor of Engineering and the Bachelor of Technology in terms of referring it out to the graduate program to which this individual has applied. But what do we do with the Master of Science in, I don't know, physics or biology or whatever? And the answer, of course, is if you look at EDGE, what you do in a case like that is to strip the 2 apart so that the Bachelor of Engineering you take away, and then you look solely at what a Master of Science, biology, chemistry, physics, what is that? And if you go into EDGE, you'll find that that's a US bachelor's degree. So what you've got are 2 bachelor's degrees, one in engineering or technology, which is essentially engineering, and another that's in another scientific field that's called a master, but that you're going to treat, according to the credential advice in EDGE, as a US bachelor's degree. But especially when you're bringing in new folks into the field and training them in your office, they're liable to get confused on that because of the integrated nature. And somehow one might think that because they're integrated, that master's degree is a little more than it should be. But what you always do is strip them apart, look and see what the individual Master of Science degree requires in the way of an entry requirement, and you will find inevitably that it's any degree in science, perhaps 50%, second class or better, but it's going to be any degree. And what does that mean? That means a 3-year degree. So I just wanted to kind of toss that out there as another form of the integrated degree that we're starting to see out of India, and you have to watch out for.
Thank you, Robert. That is some of the expertise that I think people come here for. Dave, I don't see any other questions that we've had come in. Anything in particular that we should address here at the end of the webinar?
Well, I can't think of anything except to say that we were recently made aware that some people, when they are looking at the EDGE database pages, and when they saw the request an update button, we're thinking of that button as only request an update to EDGE, as in there's a credential that's missing or there's something wrong in here. And it was meant, and will probably be fixed at some point in the very near future, it was meant to be update EDGE as in request, a correction, or give us a redacted sample document that's fairly recent that might be useful that we don't already have. So this is just a reminder that that button, which appears on every page, as Drew can well tell you, is your ability to really interact with EDGE and We might not be fast about getting to something and voting on it and having somebody, take the time. Remember, the IESC is all volunteer, workforce that has plenty of full-time work to do in their normal jobs. I won't say real jobs, just normal jobs. But that's the way that you can connect with us whenever you see something you think is wrong, or if you have a credential, by all means, you can use that button to submit a redacted credential. So that's all I've got in that respect.
Dave, that's very helpful. That if we are not effectively communicating what that button can do, it's not very effective communication that we're using. Let's see what we can do to fix that. Thank you for highlighting that. That is the kind of feedback I come here for. Shelby?
Yes, I just wanted to circle back real quick to something that Dave and Robert had mentioned earlier about the conference, and how you might be able to petition your institution to allow you to attend. The sessions are available to look at. The session descriptions are available for you to look at. You can filter them by groups. I believe international is group 2, but don't just limit yourself to group 2, because there's lots of other interesting sessions, and you might be able to put together a list of sessions that might convince your supervisor or your supervisor's supervisor to release some funds in your budget. If you can show how many good-looking sessions or interesting sessions that relate to whatever it is that you're doing at your institution, you might be able to use that to get your conference attendance approved. And there's some really great sessions on the schedule related to international. There's also some really fascinating ones that I want to go to in professional development, and there's all kinds of fascinating stuff on there. And I'll be quiet now because I see that somebody has actually asked a question, and I want them to have a chance to get that answered.
I guess that's my cue. We do have a new question, and I was unaware. Can we talk about the IESC Fellowship Program? Who can apply, when our applications, etc.? I can start that out. ACRO members can apply. And we usually start taking those applications in April or May, but maybe it's even sooner. Drew, you got any info?
So you might see me looking on a second screen right here. I'm pulling it up on the website. There actually is a page that has some details about the IESC Fellowship Program, but essentially the idea behind the fellowship is to offer guidance in the earlier stages of one's career as they are learning how to evaluate credentials from insert education system here. What we've learned anecdotally is sometimes folks are brought into domestic admissions, and they are just rock stars. They do such an incredible job that they get handed these additional opportunities to shine with education systems from all around the world. And they may not have the same background with all of those education systems. And those are the folks that we sometimes hear, like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to evaluate this. I don't know what I'm looking at. How do I compare, rate? These are all the types of things that are that are beginning stages of learning how to evaluate. And what the IESC Fellowship is about is teaching you how to do the research. When you're going to be doing research and coming to that determination, making a evaluation judgment on what you're looking at. How does it compare legally within the education system? How, like, what is required to get into it? And so when you're wanting to know who can apply, I did find the website here. I'll post it right down in the chat for everyone. But things that that do typically happen, we have it so that we're sending out applications towards, think about the end of the school year, over summer. Then we're coming back, and then it's in the fall is when we're making those determinations and kind of assigning those projects once everyone's kind of getting back into the swing of things. And then that pushes forward to annual meeting is where you're going to be presenting, and that white paper that following summer. So the folks that are eligible, well, once you've been determined eligible, you will be expected to listen in on our twice a month calls. You need to be in the first 5 years of your international credential evaluation kind of career. And let's see, Robert, do you have anything that you want to add in there right now?
Drew, be glad to. First of all, I don't suppose it's surprising to anyone that most of the books that you see scanned into Edge credentials entries are rather dated. In fact, I think the newest one you'll find in there is probably around 2004, 2005, something along those lines. So about 20 years old. And this simple reason is that print publications are simply not sustainable. But many of us that have been in the field for a long, long time were raised on those things. We used them. We got them in our offices. That was all we had, especially pre-internet. But what's more, the research opportunities that led to those books. I was fortunate enough to be on 2 of them: the Canada workshop in the late 80s, and subsequently the Philippine workshop in the very late 90s. Just a wonderful opportunity for researching this kind of stuff, speaking with, actually going in country, speaking with university and other school officials, ministry officials, and pulling all that information together and putting it into a publication that your peers and others can then use. Those opportunities are essentially gone, largely gone. And so the Fellow Project, I think, helps sustain that a little bit in a much more sustainable way. It helps ACRO in the sense that a session results from the research work of the new fellows, and secondly, another project of some sort. Until recently, and Nancy highlighted this earlier, until recently we had asked the fellows to do a session and a white paper. But we began to realize that maybe that we were kind of straitjacketing ourselves. And so each new group of new fellows will be offered the opportunity to, after other than an annual meeting session, what kind of research project they actually want to do. Do you want to do a white paper? And that's perfectly fine, like we've been doing in the past. Or you could do an ACRO webinar where it'd be like a sort of an enhanced ACRO presentation at annual meeting, if you will, not unlike something like we're having here. And so it really does enable the relatively newcomer to the field to hone their research skills and be a part of an endeavor that's really pretty exciting. And it adds, of course, to the information that ACRO Edge ultimately then disseminates to all of you all. And so it's a really a great opportunity, and I encourage you all to think about it. The very newest fellows, Sarah and Jackie, that we mentioned earlier when we were naming all the IESC folks, what they're going to be doing at annual meeting is a session on, and thus their research project, joint and dual degrees. What are they? What's the difference? That sort of, what do they look like? This sort of thing. And so it'll be an exciting presentation. I'm looking forward to that one as well. And what more they come up with. Some of the things that have been done in the past, offshore medical schools. They even did an update last annual meeting on that. It's several years after they had initially presented it, and it was even more fascinating than the update. But Indian grading, I think Nancy mentioned that, has just now been completed. We had one prior to that on the Bologna process. So there's some exciting topics that are being involved here that enable somewhat newer folks. And I think Drew highlighted it, 5 years, up to 5 years is what we're looking for. Give them the opportunity to to immerse themselves in a way beyond simply, what they see come across their desk. So again, I hope that others will think about it. I'll admit one other thing. We're also hoping to build the next level, the younger generation of international admissions experts that can replace us. Back to you, Drew.
Replace is not how I would describe it at all. I look at it as we have all of these folks that learn to navigate and find this information, as Robert was mentioning, before you could easily just go click somewhere. And we don't want to lose all of that resourcefulness. So we're tricking all of you into coming and learning all of it so we can perpetuate those best practices forever and ever. What can I say? We like best practices here at Acro. It is a best practice for us to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Every third Thursday is when we like to be here. Please continue to submit your questions and updates. As we've mentioned, we appreciate all of it, and they are going into our queue so that we can update that for you. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.